What is up, LSN students, and welcome to the latest action-packed screencast. What you're going to want to have out now, either printed out or up on your computer, is the handout on federalism and Hurricane Katrina. We're going to start by looking at a few key terms until we move on to something else. So first of all, federalism is something that we have discussed already. Federalism is the constitutional principle that there is power divided between the national, state, and local governments. Each level of government has their own responsibilities. So while you're filling out your guided notes there, make sure you pick one of these responsibilities here and list it on your paper. In the Constitution, it's broken down between expressed, implied, and reserved powers, which we'll talk about those at a later time. But right now, we're going to move on to the Supremacy Clause. Now, the Supremacy Clause is the idea that the federal or national government has supremacy or is supreme to the state governments. So essentially what it means is that the state governments cannot overrule the federal governments in any way because the federal government needs to be the strongest. Otherwise, you'd have 50 states kind of doing their own thing, and you'd have too much of a variety of laws and too much confusion from state to state. The federal government is there to try and keep order amongst the states as one of their jobs. So what this means is that states cannot create a law that goes against a federal law. For example, murder is a very bad law, or a very bad crime, obviously, and it is a federal law to commit murder. So that means that the state of Maryland cannot come in and say, hey, we're going to make murder legal now. No, the federal government would step in and say, you're crazy, Maryland, you can't do that. That's a federal law. As you can see from this cartoon here, it's the United States telling New York, you can't tell me what to do. And so, all in all, what you need to remember is that when federal and state powers conflict, the federal government is supreme. They are all powerful. Next is kind of a random term called eminent domain. This one doesn't really have a place in all of my 8 units, so I always just kind of throw it in here at the end of Unit 1. An eminent domain is the government's right to take someone's private property for public good. Now, the government will pay that citizen for their land or their property, but still, if you're a citizen, you probably don't like that. If you've been living in a house for 20, 25 years, and the government says, hey, we'll pay you, but we got to kick you out of your house, you're probably going to be like, that's not cool. Why do they do this? Why does the government take citizens' homes? They'll often do it for public projects, maybe something like a new expressway because there's too much traffic congestion. It could be for a new airport because the other local airport is getting too crowded. And again, that's controversial. It's probably not going to happen in your lifetime. It's likely that the government won't need your house to build their own project. But when it does happen, it is obviously pretty controversial. And some of these have gone to court because citizens have tried to sue the government for trying to take their land. All right, so Hurricane Katrina. Hurricane Katrina is a really, really terrible hurricane that caused a horrible event in 2005. The hurricane itself was pretty massive and really bad, but the bigger issue is that these levees broke that protected New Orleans from flooding, and it caused massive flooding. You can see here in this picture, there are houses underwater. And what happened is you ended up with 1,800 people dead, over $280 billion in damages. And, it wasn't just your normal hurricane where it comes through and there's a little bit of flooding and, people rebuild. This was a tragic event. And the reason we talk about it in this class is because there's a total breakdown of federalism. In this case, you had an emergency, a dire emergency. The local government was calling out for help. They kind of knew how bad it was, yet the state and national government didn't really pay attention. They weren't taking the necessary steps to understand how serious the situation was. You see images of downtown New Orleans at this time. It wasn't that bad. There wasn't that much flooding. But the areas surrounding New Orleans were getting wrecked. And again, the state and national government were way too slow to respond. And that is a breakdown of federalism. Because in these types of situations, the state governments, the national government should be there to help the local government. In this case, they simply did not. So what you're going to do is you're going to open the YouTube link that's on your Word document. It's also on assignment view if you're someone who printed out that Word document. and you're going to watch about a 30-minute video on Hurricane Katrina and the government's response. I'm not going to lie, it's not the most fun video in terms of, it's a pretty heavy video. I think it's very interesting, and it really breaks down what went wrong. But you know, as it gets towards the end and it talks about the conditions and what a lot of the people are going through, it's kind of a heavy watch. Just as a heads up. But as the video plays, you're going to fill out your worksheet and think as the video plays, what should have been done? What should the national government have done? Because you're going to see how much they failed. What should the state government have done? There's some things like communication broke down because the internet went out and phone lines were cut. But that's not an excuse for how the state and national government responded. And the local government could have maybe, you could argue, be a little more prepared as well. So that's it for today's screencast. Go ahead, check out that video, answer those questions. If you're ever confused, if you're confused about this, confused about anything else, please reach out to me, email me, get in touch with me. Other than that, have a great day.